after a while, that's something that kind of seeps into the subconscious and makes you who you are. So in a sense, when I'm choosing different materials to sew together or to create from, it's already embedded in my subconscious, right? So my subconscious is different than everyone's subconscious out here. So the way that you all relate to my work is different and it's personal on a different level. So it's like you see the lace in the painting, and the lace in the painting might remind you of a prom dress when you were in your 60s or something like that. So it reminds you of something in your subconscious. So that's the process base. And then when it's referring to conceptually, it is more so referring to the idea that, and this is going to get a little deep, but when we're talking about the id and the ego, when we're discussing philosophically, you have your id, which is like your natural instinct and what you normally want to do, and your more human animalistic instinct, right? And then your ego suppresses it, and it tells you right from wrong, but your ego is generally governed by society norms. And our society norms are normally taught to us by our parents, who are taught these things through the government, religion, social norms, what's right and wrong, but isn't always so, that this is what we should always believe. So it's questioning that, and these are things that are built into our subconscious and we don't always realize that are there. And it's something that, after a while, it's so ingrained that it feels like a second nature. So that's basically the difference between the process and the conceptual aspect of the subconscious and conscious being used in the work. And when I'm working more so with my loom paintings, it is like this subconscious work. I can listen to like Miles Davis and just kind of work and Miles, that's all to say, all right? So I just pick up fabric and I'm like, this is vibing with this is good with this, and I'll throw some of it in. And then sometimes I don't even realize it because my subconscious is telling me these fabrics work well together. Sometimes I know where the fabrics come from, and I know that these two people have interacted at one point in time, and maybe that's why I chose the two different fabrics. And it comes out later because it's already been built into my subconscious in this sense. So.
It's the process. Like you're sort of the sage before your materials, because you are an avid recycler. That is something that you have. You proudly wear on your chest, and I think we all should. I think recycling is awesome.
I'd like to wear it more, but it's. I do use acrylic paint, so I can't really 100% wear it. I do recycle a lot of clothes. All the clothes in here is recycled.
So sort of tell us, like, what about a piece before that sort of subconsciousness takes effect after the work is made? Like, what draws you to the materials that you're creating canvases from?
So sometimes it's based specifically on the piece. When I'm creating a loom painting, which are the ones that are woven on the structures, I refer to these as loom paintings. But then I kind of consider these more traditional in a sense that you air quotes, because it's not a standard canvas cloth that you stretch on substrate. It's actually, I sew all of this. It's all done on the sewing machine. But the processes are completely different. So whenever I'm working with like a loom painting, it is a little bit more, I'll choose the fabrics more so sometimes based off of who they came from. And recently, when I've been kind of decompressing from having such a really like built up concept, I will choose it based off of color, theme, but it just depends on what I'm working on. So it is a case by case basis if you think about it. For my more traditional paintings, all of this fabric came from my kids. Like, these are my kids' clothes. And this is like my family, right? And this one over here is also, these are scarves and fabric that came from my kids' family and my kids' clothes. And this one has fabric from like great-great-grandparents in it, and so does this one over here. So sometimes it does have, something very much invested and very sacred to our individual like family in it. And at times, like one of my more newer bodies of work, this one's like a year old now, the work has been based off of more of the elements and principles. So it really just depends on, honestly, where I am. Like, do I want to try to have this built up concept or meaning? Because the fabric only strengthens the meaning of the piece. And so my newer pieces, I've been trying to more so make it about the color, shape. And so it just really depends individually on what I'm trying to articulate in each piece.
Okay, yeah, so getting sort of back to the materials that you're selecting and the significance that they have, could you sort of tell us if the pieces that you're holding on to, you're sort of like stewarding them because you know that they can have a life beyond being your child's clothes or beyond being the clothes of great grandparents. Is that something that is in your like immediate consciousness when you're working versus like what comes out afterward once the piece is completed from that subconscious place?
I think it is for me conscious that it needs to be able to relate to everyone on a personal level. And it's kind of like when I'm instructing my students on writing artist statements. Like you don't want it to be super deep, but you want to be able to relate to people on a personal level, but not only just relate to you. So the material, even though it relates to me on a personal level, I subconsciously think, how does like polka dots relate? How does this style of fabric relate? Is it from the 60s? Is it from the 70s? Where is it from? Where is it sourced from? How is it made? Who made the fabric? What processes did it go through? What hands did it go through to get to a point in time? So subconsciously, I'm aware because everything kind of has this like connotation or this kind of, I don't know, idea
like
that kind of, it's
was.
like you can't use the material sometimes haphazardly if you're trying to articulate a meaning. So I think once I figure out what I'm making, sometimes I'll like go ahead and start piling together, okay, this is related, then I'll just go. Because if I think about it too much, it never turns out right. Like I'll work on these loom paintings, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna plan this, I'm gonna plan that, and I'm like, that looks way too planned. It's better just to put the materials there and kind of let them use it. Or I listen to a lot of music when I'm working clearly. And I let that just kind of take it away. You know? Yeah.
That's fascinating. So rather than letting the procrastinator special get the better of you, you're creating piles that you know you will use for a specific piece.
If the piece has some type of intent for the content, right? It has to be more specific. It can't be haphazard. It has to be purposeful. So then, but there, like I said, it depends on what I'm making. So like I said, this body of work is very much heavy on conceptual, it's concept based. And my other work is more formal. So it's more about the colors, the shapes. Like, it's not about that. So once I establish what we're making, then I go from there. Yeah.
So I guess going into the loom pieces a little bit deeper, I think, they're beautiful, they're fascinating, but the one thing that stuck out to me immediately was that there's life with them. Yeah. There are plants, there are pothos, vine, and then there are English ivy. So I was wondering if you could guide us through the significance of using English ivy, of using pothos, of just putting living things in your artwork in general.
Well, as I've already kind of mentioned, everything that we create or who we are is already in us at one point in time. Someone in this room is an avid gardener. My mother. So growing up, I was always surrounded by plants, nature, the outdoors. So it kind of felt like second nature to bring it back to creating something with plants. And the fun fact about the loom paintings, which are, like I said, the ones that are created on the looms, I was hiding these when I was in grad school. I thought they were really weird. And it was during COVID, and my professor was like, "What's that in the background?" I was like, nothing, don't look at that at all. It's nothing to look at. And then he was like, "You need to stop hiding those and start producing that," which is really cool. But the plants kind of came in to sew because at that time I was working on work surrounding like colonialism, which kind of pairs into the title of the show, which is The Paradox. And we'll get into that in a sec. But the English ivy was significant because English ivy has also been uprooted and brought somewhere else where it wasn't supposed to be. And the English ivy actually became invasive in a sense because it wasn't where it was supposed to be. So these plants, every plant has some type of symbolic nature or meaning to it. And then when you're dealing with plants, you're dealing with this ephemeral aspect of something that could live or die at any point in time, depending on how you change the lighting, how you change even the air and the atmosphere or the watering. They don't always make it. So there's like this idea of, you know, we're trying to figure out how to get through life and all try to manage to get along and to love one another. It's like this colonialism prevail and just keep us all apart, and we're not always able to see these out forces, or this die and receive back. So there's always this conundrum or this conversation being had in some of the pieces. So that's where the plants came from, because they have this cycle, right? So you water them, you give them light, and they grow, and they blossom sometimes, and sometimes they die, and they're real, you know, they're tangible. So there's that aspect of it as well. But generally, depending on which each piece is about, that's how I choose which plant I'm using generally. So for the majority of these in here, they do have English ivy in them, because the majority of the pieces are discussing this heavy topic of how colonialism affects everyone in this room, not just one person, but everyone in this room. And I think that's really important to discuss when we're trying to all get along. You know, it's like, if you can point out a more common enemy, your enemy of your enemy is your friend, in a sense. So it's like, you can get together with the idea, like, we are all affected by this idea, in a sense. No one is safe, in a sense. So that is why the ivy is like surrounded, and you know, it takes over, just like colonialism does. You know, they've been in fact called the English ivy, you know. And then so for some of the other pieces, there's the golden pothos, and the pothos generally can be symbolic for femininity. It can be symbolic for growth. The English ivy also is a really strong plant. So, I mean, I've had one in my studio that I forgot to water when I was like teaching classes for like a semester, and I came back, bad boy was still going. Had no water in it, it was green and everything, and I was just like, well, you're really resilient. And actually, when I was looking at properties for the plant, that was one of the things that I was known for, this idea of being very resilient. So that's one reason why I bring the pothos in from time to time. So for my people that aren't like really big on plants, the ivy is in this piece and in the middle, and the pothos is the bigger pieces on this one right over here. And I think there's only a few with pothos in it, but that's definitely one of them.
Well, so I mean, my eye immediately was drawn to the denim pieces because indigo. There's a Caribbean experience of indigo plantations in the Caribbean and in the tropics, really. So I was wondering if this. I'm going off script. I'm sorry. If you could tell us a little bit more about the choice of denim, specifically with the pieces in the center of the room and the staggered stair step piece over there on the wall that has the ivy entwined.
So this piece is more so referring to the idea of the classifications of genes, right? So it was talking on more socioeconomic issues and how that is also affected by colonialism, and how we divide ourselves up by these different things, but we all wear jeans. Like, jeans are something you can dress up, look super nice in, you can wear jeans with this, you can wear jeans with that. I have my dirty pink jeans. There's different jeans that are made in the United States, maybe sometimes, you know, created sustainably, and there's other jeans that are bought from Route 21, not hating, but they're more stretched in them, and they're not as like durable. So it's really just dividing up these classifications into something super simple. It's just jeans. But that's how we kind of get on these things. We get built up in our head, and we divide ourselves, and it's like, you know, it's really not all that serious. You know, we're discussing jeans. We all wear jeans. Who doesn't own a pair of jeans? So that's the idea behind these two pieces. And the cool thing about these jeans, one of my favorite things about this piece, I'm showing favoritism, I'm sorry. When I worked for the school district, everyone at my school would come and drop jeans off by my desk. So these jeans are literally made from like the fibers of like every race, ethnic background, culture that you could imagine. Like, it's all mixed in there in both of these pieces. I have so many jeans, still have jeans left over.
You know, an interesting thing to think about in terms of denim is that, you know, 100 years ago, unless then, not everybody wore jeans. It was working class people that wore jeans and overalls. And
That's when jeans were invented. They were brought out with California. What is it? Who's the maker that like
Levi
started them, brought them to California because they were working jeans. But now it's like you have a pair of jeans from a specific designer that are like thousands and thousands of dollars. So yeah, it's definitely something that comes into play with the jeans for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I remember my first one, Levi's on Europe, in 1970. This pair of jeans make me, I remember from the 3 or 4 years, I go on a Barbelai, I go anywhere. This jean is so tough, it's so big. It was indestructible. It's tough.
They were gonna last.
You know, you see, I said, wait, sorry.
My parents have stories.
I love my kids. I love my kids.
I'm curious about how
End up like that.
how the design of the plants affects the pieces overall. Because in some of these, you'll notice that there is a beautiful purple light on a couple of these, but some are not lit with a grow light, which is what you're seeing in the purple. What could you sort of tell us about the I guess the use of depth in the work?
Well, when I first started creating the loop paintings, it was hopeful that they would live, because living is hopeful, you know what I mean? The idea of but if they die, they never seeds, you know, so it didn't bother me the first time the plants did die. Because I was showing the work, and sometimes they would live and sometimes they would die, but the idea of them dying felt so natural in a sense. It felt like just this cycle. So then when I started thinking about what the work was about wholeheartedly, I was just like, well, there are these cycles dealing with like humanity and the processes and the things that we go through and the ideals. And even talking about philosophically, when I started talking about the id and the ego and the superstructure, it's like it is this wholehearted structure and the cycle. So I thought to myself, like, if they do die, that's the worst thing in the world. Is dying, saying that we beat it, you know? So it isn't, you know, or if it lives, is the fact that we live with this, we learn how to deal with it. So I think it's open-ended. You know, I think that whoever is looking at the piece, which I like the idea of people being able to have the autonomy in their work, my work, to decide this is what this piece is about. This is what this symbolizes. Because once you read the artist statement, you're going to roundabout form your own opinion. I don't need it to be, this is what it is. You can infer what you want, in a sense.
You said something really, I mean, you said a lot of very interesting things, but you said something very interesting, and now I'm forgetting. If it dies, it's escaped.
But did we win? You
Did
know,
we
like
win?
The
Yeah.
ivy is symbolic for the colonizer.
Yeah.
So if it dies, this is the worst thing in the work, that it has died and it's crippled and it's like come to this like delicate looking fragile state, which I'm like literally thinking about one of my pieces that like curled over and it died during the show. And it was beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like she was like, oh my gosh, the plant died, I'm so sorry. I'm like, that looks cool.
And I will say, it didn't pain me to pull the dead ones from the piece, but I'm glad that some are going to die. And
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. So I mean, so this can be a very simple question, or very simple answer rather. Does the decaying process affect the piece itself? And if so, does that just become a concrete part of the work, or is that something that you correct when it gets delivered back to you?
I correct all of them, because unfortunately, when the work is shown, it's hard to deliver it with the plants embedded. So unfortunately, I have to correct the pieces, because I honestly don't have the space to house all these and let the pieces grow into them. That was the initial plan for this style of work, to have the ivy grow in, and then to have this idea, this juxtaposition of like the natural, like botanical aspect versus like the built. And it hasn't gotten to the point. I have seen some shows where it has grown, but the idea was it's like fully grown. So I do have to take it out, unfortunately, when it comes home. Yeah.
There are worse things. So I guess to switch gears, I could ask you forever about balloon pieces. They're just beautiful. But also, what is beautiful are your paintings. Your figures, they have this vibrancy. I tried to light it from the sources of light that I was seeing, but like they're just so expressive. They're gorgeous, and they're all different faces. It's like walking through a grocery store, just seeing every all walks of life represented. So I'm curious to know if these are people that you know in your day-to-day life that you're immortalizing, or if you're just sort of putting them as an indelible record in your own vision, and also if you're working from life, if you're working from photography.
So I do attempt to photograph things from time to time. I would never ever say that I'm a photographer. It's actually pretty bad. But most of the pictures, I think that if I don't take them of my own children or my own family, or if I don't ask like family members for photos, I'll ask my friends. Like if I have honestly specific friends from specific backgrounds, it has to be someone that I know because it's more personable. I can feel like the colors of the word, what I'm going to add into it. So at one point in time, when I was right out of graduate school, I was trying to like keep on producing work, and I was just like, oh, well, that person has really nice, like but it fell flat because when I was looking on like sourcing from like the internet, I was like, this just doesn't feel like it's legit. It doesn't feel authentic. So I went back to what I knew. I went back to my bad photographs and like painting from those, and then asking people like if I saw something on Facebook or Instagram, I would say, hey, I really like a picture. How you doing? It's always friends. It can't be someone that I don't know. I would say, hey, do you mind if I use a picture of your kids in this moment? I like the idea of like, what's going on. Like in this picture of this family, the guy doing his daughter's hair. I was just like, oh, that isn't just sticking it to him. The guy doing his daughter's hair. I love that. I need that. And just like defying the stereotypes, like the ego. So I'll just like generally message them and say, hey, can you send that image, or do you mind that I just took a picture of it? You might see your kids in a photo. One of my friends came to my studio. She's just like, is that my daughter? I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, it looks good though, right? She's like, yeah. I was like, okay, cool. Sorry about that. I have to tell you. So generally they come from my friends.
Generally,
yeah, friends and families.
So you know these people pretty well.
I have to know them well.
It
doesn't, like I'm saying, if I'm doing different undertones, because like I said, I don't photograph super well. So a lot of times the undertones or different colors that might be in the features, there's something that I feel. They're instinctual. They're my subconscious in a sense. And that's from like, I'm going to go with this undertone. Especially for the different fabrics that are used. So yeah, I have to know them for sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, and so sort of piggybacking off of that, I see there's a picture behind this gentleman with a beautiful suit in the picture.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can say I've seen pictures from like the 1970s in my family collection, and I think everybody has like somebody doing that exact, like the flash cube gets them, and it's like just bright. And I love this picture. But what I notice most in it is the omission of the arm. And then that sort of took me along to the other pieces, and I'm noticing there are strategic things either missing or filled in to a greater extent than other pieces. Could you fill in a little bit about that without giving too much of the secrets of it?
Give you what I can. So for the majority of the pieces, if there is something about the eye missing, which there are several in here where some of the eyes, it's I see. It's like this consciousness of being awake and knowing something. So if a lot of times when I do paint, I will omit like one of the eyes and some of the features, not all of them. And sometimes it is more of a like formal aesthetic decision. But generally, if it's just like this image of my grandfather, when I look at it, I omitted it because it's like I see something. If the focus is on the figure, there's nothing else to look at. So generally, for artistic decision like that, it has to be purposeful. It can't be just like something haphazard in a sense. So yes, for some of them, when there's something faded out, it is purposeful. Yeah.
And was the piece of fabric that is painted upon something that belonged to him?
It did not. I don't have a ton of clothes from my grandfather, but it is something that reminded me of the era of which he was, and that I did choose that checkerboard material because it just reminded me of like a diner or something like that in the area that he grew up in. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it made me feel like at that point in time.
And I think the feelings do come through, and I think that's how best I can sum up the show is that like you feel it. You feel the show entirely. So I guess sort of to get to the end here, we did tease that we were going to discuss the paradox. So if you could give us a little bit of the why we settled on the title of paradox.
So I'll sum it up really quick because I already see I think we have a few questions.
Right.
The paradox, it basically talks about this contradictory phase where people are like in this cycle of doing these certain things, and generally the premise of it is colonialism. And it's like we can't always see the systems that we're in from or being used by. So it's like we rely sometimes on these systems at hand to kind of exist and to be. So it's this kind of this conundrum of like, you know, not wanting to be a part of this or not knowing that you're a part of this, but having to rely on it in a sense. And it's like self-contradictory in a sense. So that is the paradox.
That's the paradox. Well, and I would just like to conclude before opening it up to audience questions that you have another fabulous quote, and that is that I am the artist before everything. And I think artists in the room, that will resonate with them, and other people just sit with that and feel free to ask away. But thank you so much, Gabe. I appreciate it. So if there's anything from the audience.
Questions?
I'd like to ask you to have her introduce her family. The folks.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Gabrielle Torres, would you please introduce
I was gonna recognize your mom and grandma.
Things are all out there.
Your grandmother's here.
Well, okay. So this is my grandmother in the lime green over here. You can find her as my second grandmother that I grew up with. This is my dad, Pop Ty. This is my lovely mother who I owe it all to. Thank you. My brother Seth, Fitzgerald. Got two little ones right here, Anya, Torres. And then there's a little one right there, Carlos. And then he's moving around, I see him.
Yay!
And then my older brother, Ryan, Queen, right there. Aunt Abby, Uncle Ray.
Yay, Anya and Carlos.
This is my aunt. Over here, Uncle Ray's in here somewhere.
He's out on this.
And that's my cousin, Anita.
All right, so questions?
Yes.
One question. When I see every painting when you do, tout stuff make me impress me. I see some effet de deep, and by the caching, something is a caching, might make an effet de deep. And I feel another effect, qui est very interesting, is an effet de 3D, or everything is outside the painting. Except what you want to push every people, or every people outside the painting. Hey, looking, it's what I do this. That's what you feel.
That's an interesting question because some of these pieces do come away from the wall and they throw a shadow, so they do exist in 3D space.
What do you feel? What do you feel about that? What are you thinking about that?
Like I said, I think that's kind of already existing inside because I started teaching 3D in college right now, and I've realized that out of all the classes I've been teaching, it's my favorite. So subconsciously, I think that I'm attracted to three-dimensional forms. Like my newer work is three-dimensional. So the fact that my work is like kind of screaming to you a little bit more three-dimensional makes sense. I haven't manifested why just yet, but it's definitely something that's coming about. I don't know if it's like purposeful that like the pieces look 3D, but at least the off the canvas aspect is purposeful. It should be aesthetically interesting on the sides and everywhere you view it.
Okay, fantastic. And there's a question over here.
About process. Because you said that you sew. So do you sew the fabric and then paint on it, or paint on it and then put the fabric?
I sew the fabric first, so I'll sew all this together, and then I'll stretch it around the stretcher bars, and then I'll paint on it. And generally, for some of the pieces, like this one, this was a residency that I did, this woman picked all her fabric. So I brought a ton of fabric in, and I said, which fabric pieces feel like special to you, which reminds you of something? And she picked this, and I was like, oh girl, I don't know what to do with that. Like, I don't want to paint on fur. But I was like, we're gonna throw it in there and go for it and see how it goes. Yeah. What type of fur is it? It's not real fur, but it was just something that I had in a box of like different fabrics that I brought in, and she really liked it. She actually brought in for the residency like a bunch of jersey and like materials that weren't that interesting to paint on. And I was like, do you want to pick something else? So just go for it. So I had like boxes of clothes, and she was picking what she liked. So I don't really know specifically where this came from. I can tell you where this is like one of my good friend's fabric. This is like a curtain that I had. This is canvas cloth in here. But I can tell you where this strip in here, I'm not really sure where that came from, honestly. Generally, I would say like 80% of the time I can tell you where a lot of this fabric came from. But there's always that one instance that where I may not 100% remember where the specific like fabric came from. But you had a question, didn't you, earlier?
What question? I can't remember. But maybe it was about that, or maybe it was about the ocean, or maybe it was. Better ask.
I would like to know the history of the one with the hair. Hair. That's interesting. Yes.
So palatable is a piece, it's a feminist piece, honestly. And it's discussing how society has made us think that women should be and women should act. And what colors that, and it's this very like typical like colored hair in it. And then the fabric to me reminded me of something that a woman would wear in her kitchen when making like an apron. So I used like very like typical, very muted colors, and that's the hair that I chose. But there's a piece that in a sense contradicts it. That's I think it's called Absorption of Color, and it's out in the hallway, and it's done with all colors of hair. And it's just like it's kind of a defiance of like what women are supposed to represent, and saying that we are more than that. We can do more things than just work in a kitchen, and we can dye our hair if we want to. We don't have to ask people if we want to pierce our ears. It's just we are. I can have a nose ring, and I went and got it that day. You know, that, I don't know. That's just how I roll. So I made a piece kind of insinuating like, I don't know, this ideas of what we feel like we should be.
Have you ever, you know, you're using English ivy as a signifier of colonialism. Have you ever considered other signifiers? And do you ever think about, you know, by including that, and the ivy is diminutive on a lot of the pieces. Have you ever thought about the battle that is manifested perhaps in your pieces, and maybe make the ivy more stronger or more present, or another signifier of colonialism, white supremacy, whatever?
So I think that, well, the ivy is not always symbolic of like white supremacy, because in my head, that's not the only thing that colonialism has affected. But as far as like the plant choices, I have thought about using different plants, and that's actually when the pothos came about. The ivy is a really heavy topic, and I kind of got a little burnt out on talking about it, because in order to make work that discusses these heavy topics, it's taxing to research. And to learn so much, I felt like really boggled down. I did not feel well in my life, honestly, when I was making a lot of this work. So I decided at that point in time that I was going to make something different, and I said, new topic, new plant. So we changed it from the ivy, And then I changed it to something that honestly has a hard time dying, because it's, when we show this work, or when I show this work, you know, it is nice to sometimes get things back that are alive. And the ivy is very, even though it's hard to kill outside when you plant it in the dirt, it's easy to kill indoors, actually. So I have played with it. I've actually worked with a black-eyed Susan, the pothos. I sometimes work with wandering spiderwort, and then I think there's one more that I work with as well. So I've kind of dabbled around with different types of plants, and I think in the near future I would like to make some work that's working with native plants, discussing how native plants kind of affect, I don't know, the areas that we live in or don't affect, or the idea of these imported plants coming in and how that can be symbolic for other things. So it's definitely on the horizon, but I needed something that was a little stationary for a second, and that's why I'm actually switching over to working with pothos right now.
I just have a comment on, if your presentation has been plant-based, does that come from your mom being a gardener?
Yeah.
I love plants, and your mom and I have a lot in common. And then you talk about love. I don't know how your conversation brought love out, but the world is in a dire need of love, and I appreciate you putting it in your story, because it really touched my heart. And I'm so glad.
We was wondering, you said that majority of your paintings are based off of family and friends. we not in none of the paintings.
Yes,
I guess that's what happens when we start having kids. We're not. As a party, you don't have them, but Ryan and I have kids, so they take the spotlight after a while. The grandkids.
Family and friends.
Yes, I heard you mention a lot of things to listen to. The music for aspiration. Remember, listen to Nina Simone.
I've listened to Nina Simone, but there's a difference between I've listened to and I've listened to. Does that make sense? Like I know who Nina Simone is. I can name out a few songs by her. But this summer, I've listened to my things. You know what I mean? Like my Alexa only plays Miles Davis when I'm in the studio. So I can tell you, we can have a conversation about Miles. But I can start listening to Nina if you think that I should. I'm in a Miles Davis right now.
Just 2 points for Nina.
2 points for Nina? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
3 points for Nina, and with that, one more question. Four.
I'm your grandmother, but you are the fifth generation from my grandmother. My grandmother, Sarah Elizabeth, who talks 250 years. So you are her fifth generation. So is Seth. So is Ryan. And all the other grandchildren I have. So consequently, we are in the spirit with Sarah Elizabeth, my grandmother. So I'm the grandmother of you. So Seth is in the picture.
Amen.
You just can't see. He's in the
All right, Grandma.
I know that we're wrapping up, and as Gabrielle's mom, I'd just like to say thank you to Karen and Eric for such an awesome evening, and for all the people that we invited here tonight. And I see my pastor, he slipped out, Pastor Eric, and my Bible Way Church family, as well as Mount Zion Methodist Church, as my other church family, and everybody that came out tonight. I'm just so elated that she was able to come home and present her work to us here in Sumter County. I want to tell her how proud I am of her. Thank you all for being here.